been asked to do a vlog about my background and how I came to be bicycle touring. And the idea of it makes me pretty uncomfortable. But it was the request of one of my valued and awesome Patreon supporters. So, of course, I'm more than happy to oblige. But to make it a little bit more stimulating visually for you, I thought I'd take you on a walking tour of Plovdiv while I did it. And hopefully that makes it a bit easier on me too. So let's do this. So let's start with your question, Doug. I grew up in the UK. I was born in the Lake District and lived briefly in Yorkshire, the West Midlands, Devon and Oxford. My parents took us on European holidays whenever they could and sent us on school trips overseas, so that all will have instilled the travel bug in me from a very young age. I bought a round the world trip ticket in 2004, thinking that would be like a standard year out type of thing, but something switched and I knew that I wanted to just continue travelling forever. I just had to work out how to sustain that, and it seems like bicycle touring is a pretty good solution. Careers wise, in the UK I worked in car rental quite by accident, but that was important because it taught me how to sell non-tangible things like excess protection, which landed me my dream job in Australia of fundraising for not-for-profits. And not only that, but the job was a travel role, so that satisfied my need to move all the time. And also what that meant was because I was away every single week, I didn't have to pay rent anywhere, and thanks to my superb network of friends letting me crash on their couch at weekends, I was able to save up and buy a house, which is basically how I've come to be able to travel full-time now. In terms of where I've been, the round the world trip ticket took me mostly through Southeast Asia and Europe. After I got back from that, I was out of cash, so I went and lived in Korea to teach English to replenish the funds and sort of feel like I was travelling still. From there I backpacked back through Central Asia along the Silk Road, and then that's when I emigrated to Australia. And from there I travelled a little bit in the Pacific, took another year out to South America, and then took up the bicycle touring. Was it 2016 when I cycled around Australia by bicycle, went back to work for a year, and then took up full-time global hoboing in 2017. So I've been living out of a backpack since 2004 and living on the bike since 2017. Kiwi guy wants to know how long or how many years I plan to continue cycling for. As long as I can, as far as I can is the plan. Currently I'm aiming towards Istanbul, famously, for the last 3.5 years now. I want to go around Africa. I've travelled a lot in South America and Asia, but I've scarcely been to Africa. So I would love to cycle down the east coast and then up the west coast. Probably, I would estimate that's about 3 years worth of cycling. I'd love to cycle the Pamir back towards Australia, and I'd love to go back to South America with the bicycle. So I can probably map out a good 10 years worth of cycling. Next question, I'm not sure if it's from someone called Iv or Ivy, but the question is, how many countries have I cycled in, and my favourite country in the Balkans? I've counted for you. It's approaching 30, but that's a bit cheeky because it includes stuff like San Marino and Monaco and the Vatican City. I'm not even sure I took my bike in the Vatican City. All but one of those countries, being Australia, all of them are in Europe. And consequently, my favourite country in the Balkans is Albania because it feels the least European. It's full of incredible people and it just feels exotic and different, and I'm very keen to get cycling in the Middle East and Africa and places more exotic. Ashley asks me the easiest question and the hardest question. First of all, what's my favourite thing that I've got by the side of the road? That would probably be these Bluetooth earphones and most of my sunglasses, including these Ray-Bans. And the hardest question, which is what's my favourite place that I've ever visited, which is borderline impossible to answer because I've been enormously fortunate with the places I've been able to visit. All I can tell you is that one of my favourite things in the world is arriving in a new country for the first time and having little to no clue what's going on, how anything works, and then having to figure it all out by myself. question is from Wheels on a Bike, who wants to know how I organise my finances and house and so on to support the trip. It's quite convoluted. Here goes nothing. When I was with my ex, we bought an apartment together in Sydney, and when we were together we advance paid the mortgage and got several years ahead, so that will actually be paid off next year. I worked out that my share of the income after the mortgage was paid would be worth about 100 Australian dollars a week, and so started living on that budget back in 2016. Meanwhile, because I've only worked a few years in the UK and a few years in Australia, I'm not going to be entitled to a pension from either of those countries. So to secure my financial future, I saved for and bought a house in Brisbane as like an investment property interest-only loan, which I'll need to start paying the capital on in the next few years. But right now that basically covers itself and hopefully will be my retirement fund, whereas the rental income from the apartment in Sydney will start paying me an income next year of 100 Australian dollars a week. And right now I'm depleting my savings, which are currently offsetting my Brisbane mortgage. I've been running down them since I finished working in 2017. Does that explain the finances, hopefully? David would like to know my views on the most bicycle-friendly places to ride. So for city bicycle lanes, obviously the Netherlands, Belgium, to a slightly lesser extent maybe Germany. London's not awful either, but for cross-country cycling, Switzerland, I think Austria and Belgium again have this system of bicycle roads that cross the country with no traffic apart from the occasional tractor, and excellent signage, so that was really nice cycling there. And also I remember France, because it has so many country lanes and so little traffic that you scarcely have to share the road with anyone, and it's like the entire country is a system of bicycle lanes. Siogas, sorry for the pronunciation, and Orwanification both ask how I got into long distance cycling and what motivates me. It's purely a practical thing to start off with. I was living in Australia. Typically I would work for a year or two and then travel for a year, but I was applying for citizenship and so couldn't leave the country. I'd already driven around Australia in a camper van, so I began wondering if a bicycle could take me to see the things that my camper van couldn't. And I was very clueless, but it turns out you absolutely can ride your bicycle through the outback on dirt roads, and so I did. So that was the motivation. In terms of what appeals to me now, I'd always wanted to find a way to travel indefinitely, and bicycle touring gives me that. With a bicycle and a tent, you've got your accommodation and transport taken care of, which are the two biggest expenses. But I also just love the part of it that's moving. I've always loved just sitting on a Trans-Siberian train or an Amazon boat or a long distance bus and just moving. So that's great. And also the amount of food that I can eat is also an appeal too. Shelley asks me how I got into cycling. My dad taught me how to ride a bicycle in the garden, and then several years later, when it was time to get a new bicycle, I turned down the offer of a bicycle for Christmas and telling my parents instead that I wanted a stereo instead, so not the strongest background in cycling. Next bike I owned was just a beat-up rusty thing that I used to cycle to the train station to get to work in Australia. And then the next bike I owned after that is the famous Gibbo. She also asks if I have a background in writing. No, I don't, but thank you so much for asking. And I started loving Burek almost a year ago when I arrived in the Balkans in Slovenia. So it's been 1 year of love for the Burek. So there you go, 10 superfan points if you made it this far. Thanks for your questions. See you back on the road.